Kurt, we have a fun PBT Extra today. Let's start with Lakers Nets. The return of Anthony Davis after 17 games. The Lakers went 7-10 without him. They beat the Nets, who were without KD and Kyrie, but James Harden put up a 33-point triple-double. They fall 106-96 to the Lakers. What did you take away from that game?
The Lakers look better with Anthony Davis, shockingly, right? Like, it wasn't and it wasn't even like offensively. I mean, he had 8 points. He had the alley-oop early, but he had 4 blocks. LeBron doesn't have to play center. He can play the 4, do a little more roaming. And LeBron was as active as I've seen him defensively. He had some long closeouts and plays where he just was moving. That's the end of the floor that they've got to focus on more. I mean, that's still that we've talked about this. That's where the championship was built, and they're bottom 10 in the league, and it can't be that way. Getting Anthony Davis back helps with that. At least gets them started down. I don't think they have top 10 defensive personnel with who they've let go, but they can be better than they've been. And I think at least there was a start there. So if you're a Laker fan, I think that that's the hope that, hey, we finally, plus they're big three. They've played in 11 games together. Like they just,
they're 24-24 just for context, right? So 11 games out of almost 50.
Yeah. There is time for them to still build continuity. And more importantly, what you've always seen from great championship games of teams and what you're seeing from the Suns right now, what you saw for years from whether it was the Spurs or other kind of dynasty teams, you build good habits in the regular season, right? Good defensive habits, good offensive habits, so that when you're in the playoffs, they're instinct and you're not adjusting, and you can adjust off of them. The Lakers still have time to build a lot of that. The Nets still have time to build a lot of that, but neither of them have had the continuity to do it so far.
You mentioned continuity. I think that's a really interesting word here, because if you look at how many lineup changes you have the Ben Simmons list, 76ers leading the league, and then the Lakers and Nets are tied in the second place with upwards of 20 something, right? I mean, that's just constantly. You have 24, 25, 20 something lineups with 48 games of playing time is just unbelievable, especially when you mention all the different elements. The fact that COVID-19 decimated rosters, signing G League players, trying to get anyone to fill the roster spots, and then injuries to your superstars and Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant. And we've even seen that created some issues, some tension reportedly with James Harden, perhaps voicing some frustration. What have you heard from there?
Yeah, I think what he said after the game last night, he sounded frustrated after that loss. And I think that that's a lot of it. I mean, I kind of subscribe personally to the Daryl Morey theory that chemistry is a 3-game winning streak, right? Like they just haven't had continuity. They've had all these lineups. So yeah, is he enjoying living in Brooklyn? I mean, you can speak to this. Living in Brooklyn and living in Texas, very different things, man. I think the lifestyle change and not being the center of everything is different for him. But I still think if this team were winning, he'd see it differently. They're just not. That's
what he said in the reports. He said, so I'm frustrated because I want to win and I'm a competitor. It's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, both Steve Nash and James Harden talking about these reports, and they're like, well, I don't know the validity of those reports, but I do think one of the James Harden's comments are interesting that we should pull up, and that is, and I quote, "Of course, I'm frustrated because we're not healthy. There's a lot of inconsistencies for whatever reason, injuries, COVID, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's frustrating." End quote. So I think that element is, I know everyone's dealing with the pandemic. Everyone's trying to figure out how to figure it. But to think about, like you mentioned, being in one of the biggest markets in the world on a super team with arguably an MVP candidate, you're putting up the second in the league in assists, Kyrie Irving, that whole drama, the saga coming in the season, and the fact that he's still not playing in home games. But so all these things swirling around you, that could be a different equation.
Right. And you don't feel settled. You don't feel happy. You don't feel comfortable. Right. And so you add to that the fact that he can opt out after the season, and he's essentially a free agent. He can either be an actual free agent or force a trade using that leverage. I think he wants to see what's out there. Like, if you're frustrated in your situation and you have an opportunity to make change, I think you want to explore that. And plus, Corey, he's a human being like you and I and everybody else. We want to be wanted, right? We want to be recruited. We want that experience of being told, hey, you got to come play for us, whether it's Philadelphia or, name your team. It doesn't really matter. That recruiting experience, is understandably something James Harden hasn't had because he's just kind of signed contracts and understandably wants now, right?
Yeah, you think about just recently forcing the trade out of Houston, turning down upwards of $50 million a year in Brooklyn now. What's going to happen? It's funny, though, because you see all of these different scenarios of both COVID decimating these rosters, tied in second in the league. But the difference is in the pudding, right? The Nets are third in the East.
Yeah.
And the Lakers are eighth. So this is going to be, I know we talk about this Lakers team just really quick, just put a pin on it before we move on. Is this going to be a turning point for them?
I don't know about it depends on what you define turning point as. There's a segment of Laker fans that aren't going to be happy unless they win 2 championships a year. And for those fans, like, this team isn't that good, but they can be better. I think they absolutely can be better than the 500 team they've been. I'm just not. If your goal is to be as good as the Suns or what we think the Warriors will be at the end of the season, and whoever else you want to, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, whoever you want to call the contenders, I don't know that they're that good, even if everything's kind of clicking for them. But they can be much better than they've been and be a bigger threat. And I think we'll see that. I think we'll see them be stronger the second half of the season if they can just stay healthy.
And so you have LeBron James balling right now, Anthony Davis healthy, maybe Russell Westbrook starts to accept that. Who knows what's going to happen? But the question is, can they beat teams like the Miami Heat, who are slowly climbing up the Eastern Conference? They're back in first place. It's like a couple of years ago. So what have you seen in Miami, and how they quietly, in that Eastern Conference, surpassed the Bulls, and now they're 30-17?
To me, I think one of the things that's come out of all the COVID is the strength of your culture as an organization. And that's something Miami has always had, right? They've always been a strong cultural identity. They know what they want in their players. They demand a lot of them. They have this structural, from Pat Riley on down to the guy that mops the floors. Like, everybody's on the same page in that building. I think you've seen that come through with Max Strus and all these guys, kind of Gabe Vincent. All these guys are stepping up, making plays. Hey, next man up. Well, they actually have the next man up, and now they're getting healthy. Jimmy Butler's back. Bam Adebayo's back. They got them together with Kyle Lowry, and suddenly, to me, they've always been a contender, a dark horse contender. Can they beat peak Bucks or peak Nets? I don't know, but I think that they're a really tough matchup because of they have such versatility with their system and such depth that they can throw a lot. Hey, you want to go small? We can play Bam at the 5. We can play bigger than that. We can do all these different things. And the real question is, can Jimmy Butler get them buckets at the end of games, or at least set up buckets the way that I know Giannis Antetokounmpo can, the way I know Kevin Durant can? If they can get that, I think that this is a team, and Jimmy Butler's capable of that level of play for stretches. I don't know. I think Miami Heat, if I were betting, I would just ran this the other day. They're like 6th or 7th longest odds to win the championship, like plus 1,400. Like, I would lean that way just because I think they're the best of the longer odd teams. I think they're a team that is capable of winning it.
And potentially Victor Oladipo, who, one of the biggest signings, we're like, okay, wow, he's leaving Indiana, joining this Heat team. We haven't really seen a lot of Oladipo. He could return at some point in February. You're mentioning all the other healthy athletes coming back for the Heat. That big signing, the biggest splash in free agency last year was Kyle Lowry, who's still playing at a peak level in his mid-30s, coming down to Miami. And we know, like you said before, given an uncertain scenario, what did the Heat do in the bubble? They went pretty far, did they not? So it is an interesting question. With Oladipo coming back, how does he change this Heat team?
If they get enough out of him, if he can just step in at this point in his career, after the injuries, after everything, and just give them solid role play on the wing, just the threat of his 3, he can drive, he can defend. He's a good all-around player. And if he can give them 15 minutes a night of that, and especially get into the playoffs and you can match him up with certain guys, that's a huge boost. That's just more, that's an all-star level player depth. And even if he's not that guy anymore, he's at least, he wants so badly to play. He's been out so long that I think there would be a real energy come back and just to be contributing to a winning team. What I love most about Miami is the versatility and the scheme versatility. they don't have to play one way. They can beat you your way. They can beat you their way. They can force you to do different things. Those kind of teams are tough in the playoffs.
And you just think about, this is crazy to me, just going back to Oladipo, we know that he's averaged in his career, upwards of 17 points, right? But in the past couple of years, because of injuries, as you mentioned, played 33 games. And they actually played, 33, 9, and 20 games in 4. He was just bouncing all over the league around last year. And he only played 4 games for the Heat before that injury, the season-ending injury, when he got surgery, and now he's coming back, hopefully in February. So if he gets back on the floor, can he get back to the 17.5-point production? We'll find out. And if he does, like you mentioned, just that little bit of spark, could that create enough tension release for guys like Bam and Jimmy and Kyle to help that team get to the next level? Who knows? But we're going to see this preview of a team that's really starting to hit its stride, potentially could get better and better and better, versus a Knicks team that's struggling, that's flailing, but made some trade moves. What do you expect to see from New York?
By the way, I like the trade moves for the Knicks. I think, look, you know who usually wins the trade? Team that got the best player, right? Cam Reddish was the best player in that deal. Cam Reddish, you got to pay him next year. Like his payday is coming, but he's good. He's a good quality NBA wing, can hit threes, defends. Like they like DeAndre Hunter down in Atlanta a little more, so they were willing to let Reddish go. But this is a good player who fits in with what they want to do. Reunites with his Duke buddies. He's in New York now. Start the Zion rumors up. Just let's go. Let's reunite a team that maybe could have made the Elite Eight in New York. That'll be great. I still think, though, they won that trade. Like, this just gives them depth and versatility. And if they don't have to sign him, like if they end up not liking what they see the rest of this year, they've got to figure out where they're going as a team. I don't think they'll look for it at the trade deadline, but it's probably an off-season move. Is it just me, Corey, or do they still just need a floor general? Do they just need somebody to organize that thing on the court?
Well, wasn't that person Derrick Rose?
Yeah, he's been that guy. Yeah, I don't know if that's his. I mean, I think ideally he's more of a bench role, but he's had to be that guy, and he's been good at it.
Yeah, that's one of the funny kind of stats that don't actually make sense. Like bench player, but Derrick Rose is a starter off the bench.
Yeah.
So, but when you think about that Knicks team, it's very fascinating. I think because you mentioned the Heat culture. How the Heat know who they are, and despite all circumstances, they could be in the middle of a hurricane, just as far as just emotionally, situationally, and what happens? They find the eye of the storm. They're back at number 1 in the East, right? It's just kind of, they know who they are and they can get there. The Knicks, we thought they knew who they were. We thought they found their guy in Julius Randle, most improved player. We thought he was a franchise guy, and we thought they had the pieces around them. We thought they had the coach. Right, they thought they had a new culture, a defensive team that was, a hard-nosed fought team, and now they're sitting at 11. They're 23 and 25, and so it is interesting to me to see what happened. They got Kemba, they got Evan Fournier, and there was high expectations for this New York Knicks team. And it's almost like the Madison Square Garden is more of a character in the NBA than the Knicks are. Yeah. Because of that lack. So it is fascinating to me. I do think a floor general might help, but I think for the most part, it's just ultimately, who are the Knicks? It takes time to establish that culture that we see the Heat have so well.
Yeah. Look, Julius Randle had an all-NBA season last year. He's not been terrible, but he's not been that guy. And suddenly that they take a big step back as a team with that. And it's a little bit of a problem. It's just, again, I think they thought they'd be with Kemba Walker, with Evan Fournier, with every move they made this offseason. You're like, oh, they'll be better. The East will be better, but the Knicks will be better. And they just haven't been, especially defensively, which is got to be killing Thibodeau. Just that is not a good defensive team. And that's where he wants to build the identity. And Cam Reddish can help with that. He's a good defender. They might need a couple more guys. You've got to. I think you're right, though. I don't know who they are, but
they're also young, though. I mean, like Kevin Knox, there's so much excitement around him coming to New York, and he averaged 3.5 points over this past season. But he was in the 2018 draft. You think about like Kevin Knox, Obi Toppin, R.J. Barrett. They're all these guys that people were so excited about, and then Julius Randle and Kemba Walker. We mentioned all these names, But the fact of the matter is, the veteran that stabilizes that team is Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the question that I have moving forward for New York is, well, how much time do you have? And the thing that New York doesn't have in their favor is that let's say a team like Memphis has, the Grizzlies, is that there are a lot of eyes in New York and there's high expectations in New York. Despite the lack of playoff success, people want to get there fast, and they got the taste of it. Fans got the taste of being in the playoffs. So you think about quick moves are probably coming just because it's New York. But if you had, the luxury of time like they have in Memphis to build around Ja, build around Jaren, if they could actually build around this team and not have to make these moves, it might be a different story.
Yeah, Leon Rose, to his credit, has been incredibly patient and not really jumped the gun with crazy trades as Knicks president so far. But you're right. I mean, there's a pressure there there's only a couple of markets that have that kind of pressure on the team. And at some point, does Dolan come down and say, hey, you got to do something here? At what point does that pressure start to really build?
We'll see. Well, one team that has impressed me as far as consistency is the Phoenix Suns. I mean, you look at Monty Williams, their coach, second place for Coach of the Year. James Jones, their GM, just won Executive of the Year and just got extended. You have Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. You have the role players. It seems like everything's going right in Phoenix. How have they been able to do this, Kurt?
I think, we talked about it with Miami a little bit, but I think it's the same thing. There's a cultural identity, right? They know who they are. They've built this balanced team that can, again, beat you a variety of ways. They can go big with DeAndre Ayton. They can go smaller. Good defenders, athletes on the wing. Chris Paul out there leading this thing your floor general on the floor. There's just so much to like with how that team is built. And James Jones deserves credit for a lot of that. I mean, this is a deserved extension. I mean, he was a couple years out of playing, a year or two out of playing, got thrust into this role. Took him a little bit to find his feet because, understandably, that was just a lot to ask early. But he was, you mentioned Monty Williams, he brought in people to execute his vision. He had an idea of what kind of team they wanted to build. He convinced Chris Paul to come play for it. They go out and get the Jay Crowders of the world. They just, they go pick up veterans who can help them. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot from them at the trade deadline. I'm not sure. Do they really need to make a lot of tweaks? There's not a lot of weaknesses there, are there?
I know. To me, it's interesting because it seems as though James Jones, you mentioned the two big moves in my mind. I guess three, but most importantly, Monty Williams and Chris Paul. It's almost like James Jones has been salt in Phoenix, right? Where it's I don't know if you cook a lot, Kurt, but you throw a little bit of salt in there, it makes everything taste better. And it's fascinating because those key additions, we've seen teams do things like that in the past. You think about Houston being one team, Washington being another team. There have been teams that have tried. The Lakers right now are trying to figure out how to have all these big name signings. The Clippers, it has not gone well, but in Phoenix it has. It's just the right amount of salt, and it increased all the flavor and the play of everyone on that team. Devin Booker's playing at a different level, and he's been playing at a good level. So you think about good to great. You look at DeAndre Ayton. I mean, he went from a player that we didn't know what to expect from him, from demanding a rookie max extension and almost getting it, So it's just one of those things where James Jones has actually elevated the level of nearly everyone on the basketball side of Phoenix. So the question is, down the stretch, can they repeat the same sort of success that we've seen? Do you think they can maybe potentially come out on top of the Western Conference?
I think so. I think that they could very much be there for the regular season. I think that they have the top seed, but I don't see why they couldn't win this again. I mean, maybe Golden State, Curry will eventually get out of this slump. I mean, it'll happen. They get Draymond Green back. Klay Thompson finds his feet. I think personally, I kind of think that the Golden State's high, their ceiling is higher. They are capable of more, but I don't know if they're going to get there. And I'm not as convinced where I know how good. Look, the Suns have set the bar, and it's really high, and you're going to have a hard time clearing it. And maybe there's a team that can, but right now they're the best team in basketball. I mean, they've won 7 straight. They're beating good teams. They're beating bad teams. They're showing up every night, which is the hallmark of a contender, right? They're just not taking nights off. They are just showing up and putting on a big effort every night. That's not something we see from every great team. We certainly haven't seen this year from every great team. So Yeah. Look, I think they could win it all.
Towards the top of the Western Conference, just keep an eye out behind the Suns, Warriors, Grizzlies, Jazz. So anything can happen. Now, I want to talk to you about All-Star Weekends coming rapidly. There's always, it seems like, something new. And here we have something new again. So here it is, the Rising Stars format. This is very complicated. So I'm just going to try to break it down. Instead of a rookie and sophomore team that we've seen, or Team USA versus the world, they're switching it up completely. It's going to be a 4-team tournament, replaces a single game. 28 players, 12 rookies, 12 sophomores, 4 players from the G League Ignite, which is that minor league team. You go straight to the league of just young prospects. So this is going to be fascinating because we have coaches from the 75th anniversary team serving as coaches, and in addition to the assistant coaches from the 2022 All-Star coaching staffs, who pick that 12 rookie, 12 sophomores. And then what ends up happening is each team, I'm almost done, Kurt.
No, it's long. It's a lot.
7. Yeah, they have 7 players and then one player from the Ignite. So there we go. What do you think?
I love it. As complex and weird as it seems, it's so much better than what they had. That was a drag of a night, honestly. I mean, I know people tuned in to watch, but what you'd get this year was maybe Evan Mobley would play defense, but frankly, nobody really plays defense in this game. So you get a ridiculous score and a bunch of dunks, and it's not basketball. But by putting in forcing kind of competition, hey, we play this, we advance, but also the Elam ending. So they're playing to a point total in those first 2 games. It's 275 points. That we saw with the NBA All-Star game the last couple of years, like that drives some competition, right? Like as opposed to just the free form of it. So I don't think it could be worse. Like that was a drag of a night the last couple of few years. So I'm optimistic that this will be better. We'll see what it looks like. It is kind of convoluted, but I'd rather watch this than what they were doing. And hey, 12 rookies and 12 sophomores still. So we're still going to get to see good guys. They're tying it into the 75th anniversary. We'll see how it works, but I like the idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think now in recent, because the All-Star Weekend has always been so much fun in terms of, dunk contests. And then when the dunk contest kind of, quite frankly, became less interesting, kind of got boring for a few years. In the wake, you had so much excitement around Vince Carter and Jason Richardson. And after that, it kind of was tough. And then you have the 3-point contest because they're best shooters in the league, right? They made it interesting. Clay and Steph going back and forth. And then now it's kind of like, well, what is the allure to All-Star Weekend besides being a celebration of basketball? And I do think that's pretty interesting that you're trying to make the focus on the next generation, trying to make it competitive, trying to have that ending you're describing. But it seems as though because of this, the past few years, just it being not really competitive, it's almost like just like something in your contract, right? Where it's like, if I get selected to the All-Star team, then I get this extensive, and so it's almost like that's kind of what it's become. So hopefully this is one of the many things that can help change it and be more of a celebration for fans versus just another thing to increase the incentives on my contract. Because this is such a great weekend and it means so much to the world of basketball, but it has been not that interesting for the past few years, unfortunately.
No, I don't. And by the way, I like the idea of bringing in the 75th anniversary coaches. Like, maybe some mentoring. I don't know how much, let's be honest, how much actual coaching is going on, but I like the idea of it. Like, do you have favorites? Do you have guys you'd want to see?
Yeah. Have you seen that list? Is unbelievable. I think from my perspective, the opportunity to learn from any of them would be amazing, but to have Bill Russell as your coach.
Yeah.
Need I say anything else?
Yeah. You know what? I kind of want to see Kevin Garnett come back and coach Evan Mobley. I love Evan Mobley. He's looking like the rookie of the year. He's got that inside out athleticism skills that KG had, but I don't know. I don't know that Evan Mobley's less fiery than KG. KG just wore it on his sleeve, right? Like you were going to know what he was thinking. I'd love to see some of that. So I think you can have some fun with those matchups and say, hey, LaMelo's, who's going to play, what sophomores are out there, that we could Anthony Edwards, who do you want to see him with? Does LaMelo Ball, do you want to bring Magic Johnson in to talk to LaMelo Ball? Like, I think you can have some fun with this thing.
Yeah, and once again, just the idea of like the respect of, because basketball is about history, and being able. That's one thing I love about All-Star Weekend is it brings everyone together, from the legends to the young players to the current stars, and there's this element of there's a through line here. This is basketball is from the beginning to now, and everyone's built off of the shoulders of everyone who came before them. So the idea that those people can be so intimately involved in the young players and their careers, their trajectories, and in a fun environment that's no pressure. You just hang out with Magic, you hang out with Bill Russell, you hang out with, like that would be amazing. So I love the idea, and I think it's a very good idea. The question is, will it actually be interesting to watch for fans, and will it be inviting for fans? And that remains to be seen.
Yeah.